Do you know what betrayal smells like? It smells like expensive French perfume masking the scent of hotel bedsheets and cheap gin. My wife, Lucy, stood in our kitchen, adjusting her designer coat, telling me she had to work late again at her boutique. I looked at her. I smiled. I told her to have a safe drive. She thought she was a criminal mastermind. She thought her secret was buried 10 feet deep. What she did not realize was that I had already spent the last 72 hours mapping out her financial execution. If you want a raw, calculated account of cold justice, subscribe and like right now. This is not a typical emotional meltdown. Welcome to my story, a unique addition to the archive of betrayed cheater stories. This is pure business. My name is John. I am a forensic accountant. For 12 years, my job has been to find the money people try to hide. I track corporate fraud, hidden offshore accounts, and paper trails left by people who think they are smarter than the system. I am paid to be calm, logical, and entirely devoid of emotion when analyzing data. I look at numbers, not faces. I listen to patterns, not promises. It turns out, those exact skills were about to save my life. Lucy and I had been married for 7 years. We lived in a beautiful house in a wealthy suburb of New Jersey. To our neighbors, we were the dream couple. I had a stable, high-paying corporate career. Lucy was the beautiful, ambitious entrepreneur who owned Aura, a high-end fashion boutique downtown. I loved her. Or, more accurately, I loved the woman I thought she was. I funded her dream. When her boutique struggled in its first 3 years, I poured my life savings into it. I took out loans against my 401k. I signed as a guarantor on her commercial lease. I did it because that is what a husband does. You support your partner. Then came a quiet Tuesday evening 3 weeks ago. Lucy was supposedly at a late-night networking event in Manhattan. I was in our home office, looking for an old iPad charging cable in the bottom drawer of our hallway console table. I found a dusty, older generation iPad mini. It belonged to Lucy. She had not used it in a year, or so I thought. I plugged it into the wall. The screen lit up. It was still connected to our home Wi-Fi network. Suddenly, notifications began to flood the lock screen. They were iMessage alerts. The texts were not coming from a client. They were coming from a contact saved simply as B. I clicked open the thread. The messages were explicit. Graphic photos. Detailed descriptions of what they did in hotel rooms while I was away on business trips. But the physical betrayal did not hit me as hard as the words that followed. Is the boring husband asleep yet? B asked. Lucy's reply sent a cold chill straight down my spine. He's clueless. He just sits in his office all day staring at spreadsheets. He's just a paycheck on legs, Bradley. I'm giving him another month to transfer the next round of capital into the business account. Once the new inventory arrives, I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer says we can take half his retirement portfolio and alimony based on his current salary. Let him rot. Bradley. I knew him. He was the marketing consultant Lucy had hired 6 months ago. A smooth-talking, 28-year-old guy with a slick haircut and a leased BMW. I had shaken his hand. I had paid his consulting invoices from our joint account. For exactly 60 seconds, my chest tightened. My vision went blurry. A heavy, suffocating weight pressed down on my throat. Everything I had built, every sacrifice I had made, felt like a cruel joke. The woman I shared a bed with was actively plotting to ruin me financially while sleeping with a man I was paying. But I am a forensic accountant. I do not panic. I do not scream. Panic is a luxury for the weak, and emotion is a terrible strategy. I closed my eyes, took one deep breath, and let the sadness burn out. In its place, a cold, unyielding clarity took over. My stoic training kicked in. Survival mode activated. I became the predator, and she became the target. I pulled out my phone. I did not text her. Instead, I carefully took high-resolution photos of every single text message, every photo, and every legal strategy discussion on that iPad screen. I backed them up to an encrypted cloud drive that only I could access. Then I turned the iPad off, wiped my fingerprints, and placed it exactly back where I found it in the drawer. At 11:45 p.m., the front door clicked open. Lucy walked in. She looked radiant, flushed with an energy that certainly did not come from a corporate networking event. She smelled of expensive perfume and bourbon. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice dripping with artificial exhaustion as she tossed her keys on the counter. "God, Manhattan traffic is a nightmare. I am so tired from dealing with these investors." I sat on the living room sofa, reading a book. My face was a perfect mask of calm. "Welcome home, honey. Long day? You have no idea," she said, walking into the kitchen and pouring herself a glass of water. She didn't look at me. She rarely did anymore. "The boutique needs more visibility. Bradley says we need to run a major digital ad campaign before the summer season starts." She walked into the living room, standing over me with an arrogant, condescending smirk. "John, I need you to transfer $25,000 into the boutique's corporate account tomorrow morning. We need to secure the ad space before our competitors do." I looked up from my book. I maintained steady, neutral eye contact. "25,000? That's a significant pull from our remaining savings, Lucy. We just paid the quarterly taxes." She rolled her eyes, her tone shifting instantly into sharp, manipulative gaslighting. "Here we go again. This is exactly why the business isn't growing faster, John. You are too small-minded. You just look at pennies while I am trying to build a brand. If you actually cared about my success, or about our future, you wouldn't question me every time I need to make a strategic move. Do you want me to fail? Is that it? Because it feels like you're trying to hold me back." The sheer toxicity of her words was astounding. She was setting the stage, building a narrative of emotional neglect to use in divorce court later. She wanted to make me look like the unsupportive, controlling husband. I nodded slowly. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. "I understand, Lucy. You're right. I want the business to succeed. I'll handle the transfer tomorrow." The smirk returned to her arrogant face. She walked upstairs to take a shower. I quietly retreated to my locked private home office, booting up my forensic audit software. The time for being a loving husband was officially over. The hum of my dual monitors was the only sound in the room. 2 a.m. The house was dead silent. Upstairs, Lucy slept peacefully, likely dreaming of her perfect future with Bradley. Downstairs, I was quietly reviewing her financial execution warrant. Forensic accounting is about identifying patterns. People always think they can hide money by shuffling it through multiple accounts. They are wrong. Lucy's boutique, Aura, had 3 separate business checking accounts. Over the past 6 months, money had been leaking out of them like water through a rusted pipe. I pulled up Bradley's invoices. Marketing strategy consulting. $10,000 every single month. For a small boutique, that number was absurd. I traced the wire transfers. The corporate debit card showed transactions at the Mandarin Oriental in Boston, a luxury spa resort in Aspen, 2 first-class tickets to Paris. All of it was categorized under business research. Lucy wasn't just cheating on my bed. She was using my hard-earned money to fund a lavish lifestyle for her lover. And she genuinely thought I was too blind to look at the statements. My fingers moved rhythmically across the mechanical keyboard. Every keystroke was a calculated step toward her undoing. I compiled the spreadsheets, cross-referencing timestamps from her boutique's credit card with her location logs. The data matched perfectly. There was no margin for error. In my profession, numbers do not lie. They do not have emotions. They just reveal the cold, ugly truth. 7 a.m. The kitchen smelled of freshly brewed espresso. I poured myself a cup. Black. No sugar. I needed the bitterness to match the absolute clarity in my mind. Lucy walked downstairs, wearing silk pajamas, her eyes glued to her iPhone screen. She didn't look at me. She didn't even acknowledge my presence until she reached the kitchen island. Did you do the transfer? She asked. Her voice was flat, demanding, empty of any warmth. It is pending, I replied, taking a slow sip. $25,000. It will hit the Aura corporate account by noon. She finally looked up. A tiny, triumphant smirk touched the corner of her lips. She thought she had broken me. She thought her gaslighting the previous night had worked perfectly. Good, she said, pouring herself a glass of green juice. Bradley says we need to move fast. The summer line is crucial. I'm glad you finally understand how real business works, John. You can't just hoard cash under the mattress like an old man. Naturally, I said. I watched her hand. It was perfectly steady. Narcissists never shake. They genuinely believe they deserve everything they steal. I just want you to be secure, Lucy. In fact, I was thinking we should review the boutique's long-term corporate structure soon. To protect your vision. She laughed. It was a short, condescending sound that echoed off the granite countertops. My vision is fine, John. Just handle the finances. Leave the big picture to people who actually possess creativity. She set her empty glass down with a sharp click against the counter. Her eyes flashed with that familiar mix of superiority and boredom she always reserved for me. To her, I was just a predictable fixture in the house, as harmless and uninteresting as the living room sofa. She grabbed her designer handbag, adjusted her sunglasses, and walked out without saying goodbye. I watched the door click shut. The trap was officially set. At 2 p.m. my phone buzzed. An automated alert from the bank. The $25,000 had cleared. Less than 20 minutes later, another alert popped up on my screen. $15,000 had just been wired from the Aura corporate account straight to a private LLC registered under Bradley's name. They were getting sloppy. They were moving fast because they believed I was completely brain-dead. Later that afternoon, I drove down to the boutique. I told Lucy I was dropping off some updated tax forms for her to sign. It was a calculated lie. I wanted to observe the targets in their natural habitat. I wanted to see how deep their delusion of safety ran. The boutique was bright, white, and smelled of lavender. Lucy was standing by the glass counter. Bradley was next to her, his hand resting casually on the small of her back. The moment the front door chime rang, his hand snapped away with guilty speed. John, Lucy said. Her tone instantly became annoyed, her posture stiffening. What are you doing here? I told you I was slammed with meetings today. Bradley stepped forward, flashing a plastic smile. He adjusted the cuff of his linen shirt, deliberately revealing a brand new Rolex Submariner. I recognized the purchase from Aura's hidden credit card logs from last month. My money bought that watch. Hey, John, Bradley said, his voice dripping with condescension. Good to see you, man. Lucy was just telling me how helpful you were with the funding this morning. We really appreciate the assist from the sidelines. The sidelines. A deliberate, arrogant jab. He was marking his territory, testing my boundaries while wearing a watch I funded. I extended my hand. My grip was firm, cool, neutral. My pulse remained at a steady 60 beats per minute. Just doing my part, Bradley. Marketing is a tough game. You need a lot of capital to stay relevant in this market. Bradley chuckled, looking over at Lucy. They shared a private, knowing glance. It was an unspoken mockery. They thought I was the ultimate fool. A human ATM machine paying for their trysts. Well, some people just understand the market better than others. Lucy chimed in, crossing her arms tightly. She glanced at the tax forms in my hand with utter disdain. Just leave the papers on the desk in the back, John. I'll sign them when I have a spare moment. Bradley and I have a late lunch with a new distributor. We need to run. Of course, I said, keeping my voice entirely polite. Don't let me keep you from your business. As they walked toward the exit, Bradley patted my shoulder. 2 heavy, disrespectful taps. Keep crunching those numbers, John. We need guys like you to keep the lights on. I stood in the empty boutique for a moment. The silence was absolute. I felt no anger. Anger wastes valuable cognitive energy. Instead, I walked into Lucy's private back office. I didn't need to break into her desk. I already had remote access codes to her system. But I wanted to see the physical evidence. On her desk sat a manila folder labeled Restructuring. I opened it. It wasn't about marketing. It was a draft for a strategic bankruptcy filing. Lucy and Bradley were planning to bleed Aura completely dry over the next 2 months. They were intentionally defaulting on the commercial lease. Since I was the personal guarantor for that lease, the landlord would legally come after me for the remaining 3 years of rent. Nearly $200,000. At the same time, she was drafting a divorce petition claiming I had financial control over her life, using my recent transfers as proof that I was manipulating her business assets. They wanted to strip me of my retirement, saddle me with her business debts, and walk away into the sunset with the cash hidden in Bradley's LLC. Let me ask you a question. If a hidden threat was pointed directly at your back, would you scream? Or would you step aside and let them strike empty air? I chose the air. They wanted a war. They simply didn't realize that I owned the battlefield. I immediately dialed my attorney. The game was moving fast now. They forgot that the most dangerous chess piece is the one you never see coming. The hum of my monitors was the only sound in the room. 2 a.m. The house was silent. Upstairs, Lucy slept peacefully, likely dreaming of her perfect future with Bradley. Downstairs, I was quietly reviewing her financial execution warrant. Forensic accounting is about identifying patterns. People always think they can hide money by shuffling it through multiple accounts. They are wrong. Lucy's boutique, Aura, had 3 separate business checking accounts. Over the past 6 months, money had been leaking out of them like water through a rusted pipe. I pulled up Bradley's invoices. Marketing strategy consulting. $10,000 every single month. For a small boutique, that number was absurd. I traced the wire transfers. The corporate debit card showed transactions at the Mandarin Oriental in Boston, a luxury spa resort in Aspen, 2 first-class tickets to Paris. All of it was categorized under business research. Lucy wasn't just cheating on my bed. She was using my hard-earned money to fund a lavish lifestyle for her lover. And she genuinely thought I was too blind to look at the statements. My fingers moved rhythmically across the mechanical keyboard. Every keystroke was a calculated step toward her undoing. I compiled the spreadsheets, cross-referencing timestamps from her boutique's credit card with her location logs. The data matched perfectly. There was no margin for error. In my profession, numbers do not lie. They do not have emotions. They just reveal the cold, ugly truth. The next morning, I initiated the first phase of my counter-strategy. Marcus Vance didn't look like a private investigator. He looked like a retired linebacker who spent too much time reading tax codes. His office in downtown Newark was small, functional, and smelled faintly of stale coffee. He slid a thick blue folder across the sleek mahogany desk. "Your wife is reckless, John," Vance said, leaning back. His chair gave a short metallic groan. "But the guy she's running with? He's a professional shark." I opened the folder. High-resolution photos spilled out. Lucy and Bradley outside a luxury boutique in Soho, Lucy smiling, handing him a platinum credit card. Bradley kissing her cheek outside a high-end steakhouse. I looked at the images with the detached curiosity of a doctor examining an X-ray. My heart rate didn't spike. My pulse remained perfectly flat. "Tell me about Bradley," I said. My voice was calm. Vance tapped a finger on a background report. "His real name isn't even Bradley Vance or whatever he's calling himself today. It's Bradley Thompson. He's got 2 default judgments against him in Florida. Same play every time. He targets married women with independent businesses, pretends to be a marketing guru, bleeds their accounts dry through shell companies, and leaves before the bankruptcy filing hits the courts. Your wife thinks she's the one running the show? In reality, she's his next mark." An ironic smile touched my lips. A thief stealing from a thief. Lucy thought she was a criminal genius, but she was just an amateur getting played by a pro. "What about the shell company?" I asked. "Vanguard Marketing LLC," Vance replied. "It's a ghost entity registered in Delaware. No employees. No physical office. Just a digital mailbox. Every dollar your wife transfers into that account is immediately wired to an offshore bank account in the Cayman Islands. She's giving away your assets, John. Fast." "Not my assets," I corrected him calmly. "Our joint assets. There is a distinct legal difference." I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and slid it across the desk to Vance. "I need you to keep tracking their physical locations. Specifically, their dinner reservations for next Thursday. It's our 7th wedding anniversary. I'm planning a celebration." Vance raised an eyebrow, taking the drive. "You're remarkably calm for a guy whose wife is trying to bankrupt him." "Anger is an expensive emotion, Marcus," I said, standing up and buttoning my suit jacket. "I prefer to invest in outcomes." The drive back to our suburban home was peaceful. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the driveway. When I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. Lucy was in the kitchen, aggressively typing on her laptop. A half-empty bottle of expensive Pinot Noir sat on the counter. She looked up, her expression instantly hardening into a look of practiced irritation. "Where have you been?" "I've been trying to review the quarterly projections, and your spreadsheets are a complete mess." It was a classic distraction technique. Attack the auditor before they can audit you. "I was at the office," I said smoothly, setting my briefcase down. I walked over, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. "I took a look at Aura's commercial lease agreement today, Lucy. The landlord's legal team flagged the upcoming renewal. They noticed the corporate account has been dropping below the required minimum balance." Lucy's hand froze over the keyboard. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine panic crossing her face before she quickly masked it with defensive anger. "Why are you poking your nose into my lease, John? I told you I handle the business operations. You're just supposed to provide the financial backing. Are you tracking me now? Is that what this is?" "I am a guarantor on the lease, Lucy," I said, keeping my tone perfectly conversational, almost apologetic. "If the business defaults, the liability falls squarely on my shoulders. I'm just trying to make sure we don't hit a sudden speed bump. I care about your dream." She stood up, slamming her laptop shut. The sharp noise cracked through the quiet kitchen. "My dream is doing perfectly fine. The only speed bump is your constant skepticism. Bradley says we are on the verge of a major breakthrough. We just need to expand the inventory for the summer line. If you keep choking the cash flow because of your ridiculous, paranoid fears, you are going to destroy everything I've worked for." She walked closer to me, her finger pointing sharply at my chest. Her breath smelled faintly of wine. "You know what your problem is, John? You're a coward. You sit in your safe little corporate bubble and judge people who actually have the guts to take risks. If this boutique fails, it won't be because of the market. It will be because you didn't have the vision to support your wife." The sheer audacity of her manipulation was almost beautiful to watch. She was actively setting up her legal narrative, positioning me as the unsupportive husband who caused her business failure. She truly believed her secret was safe. She believed I was an emotional pushover who would bend under the weight of guilt. I looked down at her finger, then back up into her eyes. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I let a look of carefully fabricated doubt and vulnerability wash over my face. I needed her to think she had won the psychological battle. "Maybe you're right," I muttered, lowering my gaze slightly. "Maybe I am being too rigid." I looked down at the floor, exhaling slowly, letting my shoulders drop to sell the illusion of complete defeat. She swallowed the bait completely. Lucy took a step back, her posture relaxing as her arrogance returned tenfold. "Damn right you are. I'm glad you can finally admit it. I want to make it right," I said, looking back up with a perfectly executed expression of earnest devotion. "I want to fully fund the summer expansion. I can clear an additional $100,000 from my personal portfolio by tomorrow morning early. Lucy's eyes widened with greed. $100,000 in cold cash. To her and Bradley, this was the final jackpot before they collapsed the company. 100,000? She asked, her voice shaking slightly with excitement. That would solve the lease issue immediately. There is just one small detail, I said, pulling a bound document from my briefcase. My financial advisors insist on a standard asset protection structure. A post-nuptial agreement. It states that if either party engages in financial fraud or violates marital fidelity, they forfeit all joint property and assume 100% of all outstanding business debts. Lucy's eyes narrowed, but her arrogance blinded her. She believed her affair with Bradley was completely invisible. To her, a cheating clause was just meaningless text. She scanned the agreement and secretly texted Bradley. I monitored their conversation in real time on my secondary screen. Take the money, Bradley texted back instantly. The idiot is clueless. A cheating clause is useless without proof, and he knows nothing. Sign it. Lucy smiled up at me, oozing condescension. Fine, John. If it makes your paranoid little advisors happy, I'll sign it first thing tomorrow. I nodded, my face a perfect mask of calm. They had stepped directly into the noose. The invisible trap had officially snapped shut. Next Thursday would be an unforgettable anniversary celebration for everyone involved. The crystal chandelier above the long mahogany table at the Meridian Room hummed with a faint, expensive vibration. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Manhattan skyline glittered like a pile of cold diamonds across the Hudson River. It was Thursday night. Our 7th wedding anniversary. Lucy sat across from me, looking radiant in an emerald silk dress that cost more than my first car. Next to her sat her parents, Richard and Eleanor, exuding the stiff, inherited arrogance of old money. And right beside them, occupying the seat reserved for the evening's special guest, was Bradley. He wore a sharp Tom Ford tuxedo and the shiny Rolex Submariner my joint checking account had inadvertently purchased. To 7 years of marriage, Richard said, raising his glass of vintage Bordeaux. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on his daughter. And to Lucy's brilliant expansion plan. It takes real guts to build an empire from scratch. Thank you, Dad, Lucy said, beaming. She leaned slightly toward Bradley, her shoulder brushing his with practiced casualness. But I couldn't have done it without Bradley's marketing vision. He's the one who showed me how to unlock the true potential of the brand. Bradley raised his glass toward me, a smug, insufferable glint in his eyes. Just doing my job, John. When you have a visionary client like Lucy, the magic happens naturally. Some people are just built to create wealth, you know? Of course, I said. My voice was smooth, flat, completely neutral. I took a measured sip of my water. My resting heart rate was 62 beats per minute. I looked at the condensation dripping down my glass. I looked at the ice cubes melting slowly. Creativity is a rare commodity, Bradley. I'm just a numbers guy. I appreciate you looking out for my wife's assets. Eleanor let out a delicate, condescending laugh. Oh, John. Always so literal. It's a good thing Lucy has some excitement in her professional life. Financial auditing sounds so dreadfully boring. I honestly don't know how you sit in that dark home office all day without losing your mind. It requires patience, Eleanor, I replied smoothly, adjusting my cuffs. You have to be willing to sit quietly and watch the pieces move. If you move too fast, you miss the discrepancy. And the discrepancy is where the truth hides. Lucy shifted in her chair, her eyes flashing with a brief moment of irritation. She didn't like it when I spoke with authority. She preferred me quiet, submissive, and predictable. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a sleek leather folder. She slid it across the mahogany table toward me. Speaking of finances, John, she said, her voice dropping into that sharp, manipulative register I knew all too well. I brought the executed postnuptial agreement you wanted. Signed and notarized this morning. Now, about that $100,000 wire transfer for the summer inventory. Bradley needs the authorization code by tonight to secure the textile manufacturers in Italy. I picked up the folder. I didn't open it. I already knew what was inside. I knew she had signed it because Bradley had told her to. They believed a cheating clause was just an empty threat. They believed they were ghosts in the night, entirely untraceable. Have you ever watched someone willingly tie a noose around their own neck while smiling at you? It is an extraordinary psychological study in human greed. I set the folder down on the edge of the table. I will handle the authorization at the end of the dinner, Lucy, I said. Let's enjoy the main course first. Don't drag your feet, John. Bradley chimed in, his tone dripping with unearned authority. He cut into his medium-rare Wagyu steak with aggressive precision. In high-end retail, a delay of even a few hours can cost a business its entire seasonal margin. Lucy has worked too hard to let bureaucratic hesitation hold her back. We need that capital moving tonight. We? I murmured, raising an eyebrow slightly. Bradley didn't even blink. His arrogance was a bulletproof vest manufactured from pure delusion. As her chief strategist, my compensation and equity structure are directly tied to the expansion performance, John. So, yes. I see, I said. I looked at Lucy. She was watching me, her jaw clenched, her eyes daring me to push back. She wanted me to cause a scene. She wanted me to lose my temper in front of her parents so she could play the victim. She wanted to use my anger as ammunition for her upcoming divorce petition. She wanted to tell the court that my financial control was driving her business into the ground. I gave her nothing. I smiled a polite, vacant husband smile. My mistake, Bradley. I appreciate your dedication to our family's future. Lucy relaxed, a look of profound contempt settling into her features. She turned back to her mother, whispering about a trip to St. Bart's they were planning for next month. A trip she assumed I would be funding. At exactly 8:45 p.m., the heavy double doors of the private dining room opened. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark charcoal suit walked in. It wasn't a waiter. It was Robert Vance, my corporate litigation attorney, followed by a certified court reporter carrying a portable digital stenograph machine and a mobile projector unit. The ambient chatter at the table died instantly. Richard set his fork down with a sharp clatter. What is the meaning of this? John, who are these people? This is a private family dinner. I didn't answer him. I stood up, calmly buttoned my suit jacket, and walked to the head of the long table. The server holding a tray of champagne stopped in his tracks, sensing the immediate shift in atmospheric pressure. The silence in the room became heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Thank you all for coming tonight, I said, my voice echoing clearly off the wood-paneled walls. 7 years is a significant milestone. It's the point where patterns become undeniable. It's the point where an audit becomes necessary. John, stop embarrassing yourself, Lucy hissed, her face turning a deep, angry crimson. She half stood from her chair. What kind of ridiculous stunt is this? Tell your friends to leave right now before I call security. Sit down, Lucy, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't use an aggressive tone. I spoke with the absolute, icy authority of a judge reading a death warrant. The sheer psychological weight of my calmness forced her back into her seat. Her breath hitched. Robert Vance quickly set up the mobile projector on the credenza. A bright white light hit the large projection screen behind me. Let's talk about the summer expansion line, I said, clicking a small remote in my hand. More specifically, let's talk about Vanguard Marketing LLC. The first slide flashed on the screen. It wasn't a clothing catalog. It was a comprehensive corporate registry document from the state of Delaware, cross-referenced with a financial flow chart. Bradley's face drained of color instantly. The smug smirk vanished from his lips, replaced by a sudden, rigid tension. He reached for his water glass, his hand shaking so violently that the ice clinked against the crystal. Over the last 6 months, Aura Boutique has transferred $60,000 to Vanguard Marketing LLC for consulting services, I explained, my tone as clinical as a coroner performing an autopsy. However, according to a forensic analysis of Vanguard's banking records, which my legal team obtained via an expedited corporate subpoena on Tuesday, Vanguard Marketing has 0 employees. It has no office. It is a shell company. John, you are insane! Lucy yelled, her voice cracking with panic. She looked at her father for help. Dad, tell him he can't do this. He's hacking my business accounts. Richard stood up, his fist slamming into the table. John, this is completely unacceptable. You are slandering my daughter's business associate. Turn that damn machine off. Richard, sit down and look at the screen, I said, turning the remote. Unless you want your family name dragged into a federal wire fraud indictment. The next slide appeared. It was a clean, black and white printout of Bradley's personal criminal and civil litigation history. Meet Bradley Thompson, I said, looking directly at the young man in the tuxedo. Not Bradley Vance. Bradley Thompson. 2 default judgments in the state of Florida for grand larceny and corporate embezzlement. He specializes in affinity fraud. He targets small boutique owners, seduces them, convinces them to hide corporate revenues in his shell companies to evade taxes, and then drains the accounts before disappearing. A collective gasp left Eleanor's lips. She looked at Bradley, her eyes wide with horror. Bradley was sweating now, the collar of his Tom Ford shirt soaking through. He looked around the room, evaluating the exits like a cornered rat. That's a lie, Bradley stammered, his voice dropping an octave. This is harassment. I'm leaving. You can leave, Bradley. Robert Vance spoke up from the corner of the room, his voice booming. But there are 2 IRS criminal investigation agents waiting for you in the lobby downstairs. They received a complete forensic package regarding Vanguard Marketing's offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands at 4 p.m. today. Wire fraud is a federal offense. I suggest you stay seated until the local police arrive to assist them. Bradley collapsed back into his chair, his eyes fixed on the table, utterly shattered. Now let's talk about marital fidelity. I continued, clicking the remote again. The screen changed. It wasn't financial spreadsheets anymore. It was the complete, unedited iMessage history from Lucy's old iPad. High-resolution screenshots of their graphic texts. Their photos. And most importantly, their detailed plan to bleed or dry, default on the commercial lease I guaranteed, and strip my retirement portfolio through a fraudulent divorce action. The room became so quiet you could hear the hum of the cooling fan in the projector. Lucy stared at the screen, her mouth open, her face completely pale. The words she had typed danced across the wall in giant, glowing letters, asterisk. He's just a paycheck on legs, Bradley. Let him rot. Asterisk. Richard looked at the screen, then at his daughter. The disgust on his face was absolute. Old money can tolerate many things, but public, documentable dishonor is not one of them. He slowly sat down, turning his head away from Lucy. John! Lucy whispered, her voice trembling. A single tear broke through her heavy makeup, tracking down her cheek. She reached her hand across the table toward me, her fingers shaking. John, please. It's not what it looks like. Bradley manipulated me. He forced me into this. You know I love you. We can fix this. Please, just send the people away. The classic pivot. The narcissist's final defense mechanism: play the victim, shift the blame to the co-conspirator, and appeal to the husband's presumed weakness. I looked at her hand. I didn't touch it. I looked into her eyes. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just the quiet satisfaction of a completed calculation. Do you remember the document you signed this morning, Lucy? I asked, my voice deadly soft. The postnuptial agreement? You and Bradley thought a cheating clause was useless without proof. Well, there is your proof. Documented, time-stamped, and legally verified by a certified digital forensics expert. I leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the mahogany table. Under Section 4 of that agreement, your infidelity triggers an immediate, total forfeiture of all joint marital property. The house in New Jersey belongs entirely to me. My retirement portfolio remains completely untouched. Furthermore, under Section 7, you have legally assumed 100% of all outstanding liabilities associated with Aura Boutique. Lucy froze, her eyes darting to the leather folder on the edge of the table. That includes the $200,000 remaining balance on the commercial lease. I added, a cold, malefic smile finally touching my lips. Because this afternoon, I legally severed myself as a guarantor based on your documented corporate fraud. You don't have a business anymore, Lucy. You have a mountain of debt. And you don't have a husband. You have an auditor. Robert Vance stepped forward, handing a thick stack of legal documents directly to Lucy, then another to Bradley. You have been served with a petition for divorce and a civil suit for corporate asset diversion. Have a nice evening. I turned to Richard and Eleanor. I gave them a polite, dignified nod. Thank you for joining me for our anniversary. The bill for the dinner has already been charged to Aura's corporate credit card. I suggest you enjoy the steak before the account is frozen tomorrow morning. I picked up my briefcase, turned my back on the weeping woman and the trembling fraudster, and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing them inside their own self-inflicted ruin. The board was clear. The game was won. The rain tapped a steady mechanical rhythm against the windows of my home office the next morning. 6 a.m. The house was empty. The suffocating scent of expensive French perfume was gone. By 8 a.m., a locksmith had rekeyed every exterior door. By 9 a.m., my cell phone was vibrating continuously. Lucy. Her mother. Her father. I didn't answer. I didn't block them. I simply muted the alerts and let the data accumulate. In a legal war, every panicked message from your opponent is free discovery. The tone shifted from blinding rage to desperate negotiation over the next 2 days. First came the furious unhinged insults from Eleanor, accusing me of absolute cruelty. Then came a stiff text from Richard, asking for a private meeting to handle things quietly outside the courtroom. Finally, around midnight on Friday night, a single desperate text came from Lucy. John, please. Bradley lied to me about everything. He stole my money too. We can sue him together. Please don't do this. I have absolutely nowhere else to go. I looked at the glowing screen. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no malice. It was just a variable resolving itself in an equation. I forwarded the screenshot directly to Robert Vance, my attorney, and went straight to sleep. The federal machinery moves with absolute precision once you feed it data. Bradley Thompson didn't make it out of the restaurant lobby. The IRS processed him on a federal warrant for wire fraud and identity theft. The marketing guru spent his weekend in a holding cell at the Metropolitan Detention Center. His leased BMW was repossessed 3 days later. His Rolex Submariner was seized as asset forfeiture for outstanding default judgments in Florida. He was a professional parasite who finally encountered an advanced immune system. 6 weeks later, I sat in a conference room on the 12th floor of a building in downtown Newark. Across the glass table sat Lucy, and her assigned bankruptcy attorney. Her private family lawyer had entirely dropped her the moment Richard cut off her financial capital. Her father stubbornly refused to spend a single genuine penny of old family funds to clean up her federal mess. Lucy looked unrecognizable. The emerald dress was gone, replaced by a blazer from a discount department store. Her hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail. The arrogant smirk she used to wear like armor had vanished. Her eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark shadows of exhaustion. Her lawyer rubbed his temples, looking at the thick stack of financial audits on the table. John, my client is prepared to stipulate to the immediate dissolution of the marriage. But we are asking for a restructuring of the debt allocation. The outstanding liability on the commercial lease for Aura Boutique is $212,000. The liquidators only recovered $15,000 from the store inventory. Lucy cannot pay this. I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing my legs slowly. I looked at Lucy. She wouldn't meet my gaze. She stared intently at her own hands, her fingernails bitten down to the quick. "The postnuptial agreement is legally binding," Robert Vance said from beside me, his voice cutting through the room like a razor. "It was signed voluntarily. It contained a full financial disclosure. Section 7 outlines that any party engaging in corporate diversion or marital infidelity assumes 100% of the associated business debts. Your own client chose to wire $15,000 of joint capital to a fraudulent shell company 20 minutes after my client deposited funds. She violated her vows. The complete paper trail is entirely absolute." "John, please," Lucy whispered. Her voice was cracked. She looked up, her eyes pleading. "I made a mistake. A completely stupid mistake. I let him get into my head. I lost my mind, John. But you can't leave me with this debt. I'm facing bankruptcy. My credit is ruined. I had to move into a tiny, terrible studio apartment near the railroad tracks. I have absolutely nothing left now, John." I watched her face, analyzing her micro-expressions. Even now, in the dirt, she was attempting to share the blame. "He told me you didn't care. It was a subtle, desperate attempt to make me feel responsible for her choice to betray me. The classic manipulation, wrapped in a blanket of fake tears. You had a beautiful home, Lucy," I said. My voice was quiet, steady. "You had a husband who funded your dream and a secure future. You decided it was worth less than a smooth talker with a leased car. You didn't make a mistake. You made calculated choices over a 1-year period. You simply miscalculated the forensic auditor." Her bankruptcy lawyer sighed, closing his folder with a heavy slap. "We have no leverage, Lucy. If we go to trial, the judge will look at the digital forensics and the postnup. You will lose, and you will be hit with his legal fees on top of the debt." Lucy began to sob quietly, the sound muffled by her hands. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and picked up my briefcase. I didn't look back as I walked out of the conference room. The calculation was complete. The final balance sheet of our entire marriage was zeroed out. 3 months later, I stood on the deck of my quiet San Diego condo. The Pacific breeze carried the clean, salty scent of the ocean. I sold the suburban New Jersey house within 30 days of the final divorce decree. The net proceeds were entirely mine. My retirement accounts were secure. My credit score remained a pristine 820. Every morning, I wake up to absolute silence. There is no tension in the hallways. There are no manipulative games at the kitchen island. There are no expensive bills for luxury resorts I never visited. Just peace. True, unadulterated peace. I opened my personal laptop, pulling up the final closing documents from the Vance Law Group. Case closed. Sealed. Archived. I took a slow sip of my hot black coffee, watching a sleek white sailboat glide smoothly out of the quiet harbor. People often ask me why I didn't scream, why I didn't throw her clothes on the lawn, or why I didn't confront Bradley in the street. My answer is always the same: emotion is a terrible strategy. When you react with anger, you give your manipulative enemy control over the narrative. You become the volatile one. You become predictable. But when you master your emotions, when you remain entirely stoic, you become an invisible force. You let them build their own trap, and you simply watch them blindly walk into it. Lucy thought she had a secret that no one knew. She thought she was the puppet master. But she forgot the most fundamental rule of the entire game. In a world built on numbers, the person who tracks the paper trail always controls the ultimate ending. Now, I want to ask you something. If you found yourself in my position, looking at that old iPad screen at 2 a.m., what would you have done? Would you have lost your temper and confronted her right then and there? Or would you have had the discipline to sit in the dark, stay silent, and plan her absolute financial and legal execution? Let me know your own honest strategy in the comments below. Let's see who truly has the mind of a chess player.